This is Brent with Lykins Motorsports. We have all of our parts laid out to finish up our 445 street strip engine, and our push rods came in from Smith Brothers, and these are thick wall 3/8 diameter on one side, 5/16 on the other, and they got a slight taper to them. And we're about to go ahead and get these in the engine. I've already got one in there and got it greased up on each side. The only thing that we're working with band lifters here, so the only thing I would caution you about is, see that push rod seat down in there, and the lifter is very, very shallow. So just be very careful if you're working with these to get the push rod down in the push rod seat. If you don't, you could cause some problems for yourself. Not fun times. If your coil bind clearance is pretty tight, it could be possible that you could bind the spring up or something like that. So just be very cautious. Otherwise, we're going to use some driven assembly grease, heavy grease on each side. We're going to put some on the push rod ends and also on the valve stems. And then once we get all of our push rods in, we'll go back with some grease, put some on the push rod ends on this side and also on the valve stems. Then we'll repeat the same for the other side. Just don't want anything dry when we go to bolt the rocker arms up. Working with just a little bit over 600 pounds of open spring load. So you don't want anything dry. That brings up another thing with higher spring loads. You know, most guys will try to roll an engine over with a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, and that'll work up to a certain point. But once you start getting up over, I don't know, 500 pounds open spring load, it's probably favorable to switch to another tool. I use like a 2-foot 1/2-inch drive ratchet, and that works well all the way up to about 1,200 pounds of spring load that I've used it with. Okay, we're back over to the passenger side, and there is a spot where you can park the engine when you roll it over to where all the push rods are pretty close to the same height. And when you get to there, I'm gonna go another round here. Yeah, that's about right where I want to be. When you get to that point, then you can start and put the rocker arms on. You just don't want you don't want to put yourself where one push rod is way up and the others are way down. Then you start putting a nice bend moment on the rocker arm shaft. So you want to try to do everything nice and even. Once you get to this point, very imperative that you make sure all the push rods are lined up with the rocker arm cups, and you need to keep checking that as you tighten everything up. I'm going to use some of this high pressure lubricant for fasteners. Put our nuts on here. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to draw this down, and it may be that I have to back a stud out a turn or so to get full thread engagement. If you remember, these are the long studs for trick flow heads, and sometimes you have to maneuver the stud a little bit so that you can get a full nut's worth of thread engagement on there. So what I like to do is just start and just pay very close attention to where the push rods are in relation to the rocker arm push rod seats. And you just want to go about 1/4 of a turn at a time. Okay, and then once that's done, we're going to torque. Just going to go real slow on all of them. And sneak up on it. Got a creaky engine stand. Okay. Then I should be able to just roll over. Checking to make sure everything is where it needs to be, that I've got good clearance on push rods to rocker arms. And then I can hop over to the other side. Okay, next thing we got to do, both rocker arm sets are torqued down tight. We're going to run the valves. The hot lash for this cam is 16 thousandths. That means cold lash is going to be about 10. So that's where I'm going to start. My advice would be to use the EOIC method. When the exhaust valve opens, you can set the intake. When the intake valve closes, you can set the exhaust. So we'll roll through that. The engine will probably roll over with me right here. So this is the intake valve. It's starting to close, so I can set my exhaust. Somebody put that on there tight. We can run our exhaust rocker. I like a good tight feel on my feeler gauge, and then lock her down. And then we can go and do the intake. So when this rocker arm starts to go down, we can set this guy. That's all there is to it. Let's go through the rest of them. Okay, and then once everything's done there, we're gonna prime the pump. And I don't know if you can see that on camera, but you should be seeing some drippage. We're getting adequate flow to everywhere. All right, so we got good oil flow to our rockers. Want to go ahead and stab the distributor in. To do that, I rolled the engine over. I'm going to watch this exhaust valve open and close. When it starts to close, this intake valve will start to open because of the overlap. So it's going to open and it's going to close. And I'm going to take you out of the tripod here and show you what's going on down here. I am going to stop this when we're pointing at about 34 degrees, because that's probably where I'm going to want my final timing to be. So at this point, I will put my distributor in. The rotor will point at #1 spark plug terminal on the cap, and that'll give us plenty of advance. This engine will start immediately on the dyno. So I've got my rotor pointed towards the back of the engine. That's where #1 terminal will be on the cap. I'll go ahead and put my cap on, have my plug wires ran, and then we can lock down the distributor. For this engine, since it's about 10.3 or 10.4, I'll have to look back at my notes, but it's below 10.5, I believe. We're going to use these Autolite 3924 plugs. I'll get these installed and get our cap and plug wires on. And we have a finished product. Distributor is in. MSD distributor, the steel gear, MSD plug wires, powered by 4 valve covers. Everything ready to rock and roll. So I noticed there were several questions about the valve covers clearing. In most cases, these valve covers will clear pretty much anything that you put them on. The biggest issue is the baffle inside. If you just pinch that baffle a little bit, you'll usually find that these slide right on. I did not do that here. What I did here was stacked valve cover gaskets. So in small block Ford world, they make valve cover gaskets that are 5/8 thick. They don't do that for an FE, and those 5/8 thick gaskets will work really, really well for factory appearing valve covers with beefier rocker arms. Since they don't do that for the FE guys, you can take a pair of the 5/16 gaskets and double them up. What I do is the bottom gasket, I put a layer of grease so that you can get it off the head easily. Then I put a layer of silicone, next gasket, layer of silicone, valve cover. I've never had any leaks like that. So plenty of clearance. I did have to open up the holes considerably on this valve cover. I'm sure these are mass produced, probably in China, and the holes were off to where they wouldn't even fit the studs. So a little bit of drill bit action and some die grinder action, and we were ready to go. So oil pump's primed. We're ready to make noise. So as far as this engine is concerned, we can put a fork in it. And dyno day is a week from today on Friday. Unless something happens. I did have a cardiac MRI this morning, so I expect the results to be okay, but if something comes back and they say, hey, you need to go to the hospital, then we may have to bump this back a little bit, but it's ready to fire. I've got a quick fuel Q series carburetor for it, and we'll probably try a couple different, what am I trying to say here? Carburetor spacers, yeah. 1 inch and a 2 inch, and we'll see what it does for horsepower. Thank you guys for watching the series on this engine build. Like I said, it's done. You guys have been with me through the entire thing, so I'm gonna get this one on a set of engine cradles and get it off the engine stand. The aluminum Shelby block is gonna be coming back from being line honed, and it'll need an engine stand, so we'll just swap that out, and then we'll move Mr. Dennis's 496 over into this spot, and hopefully the cam will be coming pretty soon. But that's the progression of these things. Hope you guys are having a good week. Hope you have a good weekend. I'll talk to you soon.